Welcome back to the Civic Tech in Africa podcast. As always, we're so happy that you've joined us for another incredible episode. In today's episode, we're talking about the importance of technology as a tool for creating social equity in the world. And in this episode, we interrogate the connection between technology and social equity and explore the factors beyond technology that contribute towards a more equitable and inclusive society. Joining me for today's episode is Afua Bruce, a leading public interest technologist who works at the intersection of technology policy and society. With her background in software engineering, data science, and artificial intelligence, combined with experience developing and deploying technology in and with communities, Afua incorporates an equity-based framework in her engagements. Afua is an adjunct professor at the Carnegie Mellon University and an affiliate at the Harvard Kennedy School's Beckman Klein Center. Afua's newest book, The Tech That Comes Next: How Changemakers, Technologists, and Philanthropists Can Build an Equitable World, describes how technology can advance equity. I want to introduce you to her now. Hi, Afua, how are you doing?
Hello. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited for this conversation.
I'm very happy to have you join us again. I say again because obviously we've had you at our conference, the Civic Tech Innovation Forum conference, back in 2022 when all of us were online. I think 2021, 2022, I think, and it
Yes,
was such an
those were dark
incredible.
days.
Yeah, it was those dark days. It was an incredible time. I think, as I was saying before we started the podcast, I think that was around the time when you had launched your book, I think. And I remember feeling how I said this before we started, that the way you spoke was so understandable. Because I always feel sometimes that people in the space, in the tech space, can be very in the way that they speak. The language is very inaccessible, and sort of feeds very well into the stuff that you write about, right, in the book. But we'll get to that. I want to sort of pose a question before we start, and you will, if you feel like this is too big a question to start with, you can tell me that. But do you feel, in your opinion, do you feel that technology can create equity or an equitable world?
That you are correct. That is a big question to start with, but I suppose is why we are here today, and is a lot about what I think about in my work. I don't think that
Mhm.
technology alone can create equity. I think that it's humans who create equity. I think it's humans who write policies, who decide how society will function, who decide what to invest in and what not to invest in. I do think technology advances and sort of speeds up whatever humans decide. And so technology can be
Right.
used to really support and advance equity, or it can be used to take us backwards and create a less equitable world.
What do you think now, though? So what would be your critique of how technology is developed right now in the world that we live in? I think all of us have noted how there's so many ills that technology brings to the world, but sometimes we obviously overlook some good things as well. What would be your general critique or your compliment to how technologists and developers of technology are developing tools in the world right now? Do you have a general idea of how you feel about the tech space right now?
I I feel many things about the tech space right now, and I'll start off by saying that I am an engineer by training. I started my career off as a software engineer at IBM, so I have written code before. I have managed tech teams for many years in many different spaces, and so I believe deeply in sort of the power of technology and the hope of technology. I think that it is possible to build tools that really do serve people. We use different technology tools to help us navigate the world, to get around in our cars and our roads and our streets, to access the healthcare systems that we have, and a host of other services, even if it's just getting food delivered to your home, if you're in a place where you have that luxury. And so technology can be used to do a lot of things that improve our lives. I will say that, especially over the past year and a half, as we have entered the age of AI, as it's been called, there are a lot of people who talk about technology as though it alone can save humans, as though it alone can save society, that technology on its own is inherently a magical tool that if we just think of it correctly, it will magically make everyone's worlds better. And I don't think that's the case. I
Mhm.
think that it requires really active investment and partnerships with the people who are affected by technology. So that's from all around the world, of different socioeconomic levels, of different races, different genders. I think everyone needs to be involved in this process in both identifying what needs to be built and determining if it's useful or not useful in people's lives. And so I think that is something that the tech industry can continue to improve on, is how do you make
Right.
your technology really serve a wider range of people?
If I'm someone right now who's if I'm someone in sort of joining the tech space and probably is in the AI space, and I'm thinking about developing a tool, and as you said, technology alone is not enough, right? Who who in your opinion are sort of the important actors that I need to consult as a developer of technology before I start developing the technology, right? If I'm wanting to do it right in an equitable way, which is sort of what we're talking about here today.
Absolutely. So I think that if you are developing technology and you want to do it in an equitable way, you need to start by talking to the people who are going to be served by your product. So this means that if you have a great idea to revolutionize someone's world, you should talk to those people and make sure that you truly understand what their needs are. And so this means talking to them as sort of focus groups and research, as has been talked about for a long time, but it also means including them along the way in the design process. So, what I encourage technologists to do is to get away from this idea that if you talk to a couple of people once, you've sort of checked that box and now you can move on. But instead, think about how you can talk to them at the start, how you talk to them after you've got a little bit of coding done, after you talk to them again as you are deciding what features to involve. I was able to work with one team at a large tech company about a year ago on this process, and they had created a new team. Had a new product in mind that they thought would serve a bunch of new communities for that particular tech company, and so they wanted to try something different. So what they did is they conceived of the project. They brought the team of engineers together. And then after just a month or a month and a half of those engineers working, we were able to convene a group of community experts. And so these are people who had lived experience, who that particular product would be used with, who didn't have technology backgrounds, who weren't from the same schools where a lot of the engineers came from. But we brought some of the representatives from the community in, we brought some historians in, we brought some ethicists in, and then the engineers presented to this diverse group of stakeholders to then get feedback. And what we found is that even though people in that room didn't have the technical expertise to say, I want you to write this particular new line of code, or I need you to design a new feature in this particular technical way, they could say things like, what you are describing means that I could not live my life in the way that I want to. What you are describing means that I would not be able to get access to the services that I want to get access to because of how your product would change the ecosystem. And so that is what I would encourage people to think about implementing, are what are ways where you can really bring people in early and have conversations across those technology, non-technology lines in order to make sure you are designing for what people need.
I think you write a little bit about this in your book when you say we build what we value, right? What we value is what we build, rather. Sort of that's the exact line. And in talking to the right people, you sort of get the right values in that sort of align with obviously the technology that you're building. Can you sort of talk a little bit like a bit more about that, about the values influencing the technology that we build, and how the consultative process influences sort of the value system of a technology or a technology platform.
Absolutely. And yes, in our book we wrote that what we value is what we build. And that is what I have seen time and time again in many different places, as I've worked in the private sector, as I've worked in the government sector, as I've worked in the nonprofit sector, as I've taught in academia, is what you value is what you build. And I think sometimes this can seem a bit esoteric to people and can seem very those are nice words. What does that actually look like in practice? And so I like to give the example of Twitter. Twitter, when it was Twitter, had one set of values that really encouraged free form exploration and communication, and had guidelines around what was acceptable content and what was not acceptable content, had a process to report unacceptable content and get that reviewed and removed. I'm not saying it was perfect. No one would say Twitter was ever perfect for everyone, but those were the values. And then you saw a clear change as Twitter moved from being Twitter to being X, and a different set of values were in place around what's acceptable content. Is there a way to report it and have unacceptable content removed? What is sort of acceptable discourse in this level? And so for me, that's a real clear example of what we mean when we say what we value is what we build. When our values significantly change, what we are building can significantly change as well. And so in the book, we lay out, I think, 6 different values that are important to consider if you want to use technology to advance equity. And these are things like making sure that you're bringing both non-technical and technical expertise to the table, regardless of that level of technical fluency. This technology affects everyone, so everyone should be at the table. It includes recognizing the value of lived experience and putting that into the process, as I spoke about earlier. Another value that we have is recognizing that things grow over time, things change over time. And so the skills that we need 5 years from now are going to be different from the skills that we have now. And so we need to make sure that we are investing in people learning and growing, and then we're actually making space for them to learn and to grow. So those are some of the values that we laid out in the book, and I think are really important as you think about using technology to advance equity.
Right. And I think I don't we maybe a part of me is feeling now that we should probably start with defining what equity is. And again, when I said earlier when we started, I like using language that people understand, and using and sort of defining the way we understand it, right? Because some people have a different understanding, and I know this shouldn't be the case. All of us should have the same understanding of something. But I do feel the need now all the time to sort of define from my viewpoint what I think equity is, so that we're all on the same table, or sort of on the same page rather, about our understanding of something is. What, in your understanding, is an equitable world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I think about an equitable world, I think about one that is fair and balanced, and one in which people have the ability to have some control over their lives and have the ability
Right.
to equally access resources and opportunity in the society. And so that means that, creating a level playing field in which that a level playing field for people to be able to equally access those resources and opportunities in society.
Right. And I don't know, because the thing now about how technology, or at least how technologists develop technology now. There's a lot of tech bros who are sort of creating, technology as a, hey man, look, I created a cool thing, right, in the world. And I don't think in the civic tech space we have room for that, to create cool tech. I think we can create cool tech, but there's a lot of things to consider, like accessibility. And I think you say something very cool about accessibility, which I forgot to write. That accessibility isn't just about accessing the tools, but about something. Maybe you'll talk a little bit more about it if you remember the exact line.
Yeah,
But
I can
I've
talk.
talked
Let
to
me
some. Yeah, go ahead.
So let me actually just talk about accessibility now. This is another one of those 6 values I mentioned is about accessibility.
Yeah,
And we think about
yeah,
accessibility and encourage people to think about accessibility really broadly. And so it is more than
right,
making sure that you're conforming to web standards about how the website should be designed in order to be
right,
accessible. It is about every part of the process. So even as you think about what it means to get community involvement, community input, for example, making sure that you are having those meetings at times people can actually attend them, in places people can actually attend them. It means as you talk about your products, both to market your product or in the actual product itself, the language you use can be easily understood by everyone who needs to access that product. And so we want to make sure that as we think about accessibility, again, it is in very broad terms about what does it take in order for people to actually be able to access and use the technology that you're developing.
right. And we're going to wrap very soon, but I'd like to sort of, if you can, what would the general message of the book that you wrote be really for people developing technology and receivers of technology be?
I would say there are two things that I would say are the biggest takeaways from the book. And the first is recognizing that technology is, whether we're talking about uh farm tools that are built, whether we're talking about generative AI, technology is something that is built by and created for humans, or it's built by humans, it is managed by humans, it is implemented by humans. And so when you hear conversations about it's just what the technology does. It We're subject to the whims of technology. We can have ideas as people, but the technology will magically fix things or the technology will horribly break everything. Push back against that, because technology, it's not a
Right,
natural resource. There's no river of technology that we go down to and scoop up a bucket of the latest generative AI. It's created by humans that includes you. And so that leads to the second big takeaway I'd say is that whatever your role, and in the book we talk about people who are at social impact organizations, we talk about technologists, we talk about funders, whether those are investors or philanthropists or community members, we talk about policymakers, and we talk about the average person who lives in a community that's being affected by a technology tool. Regardless of your role, you deserve both a seat at the table in the discussions about how technology is built and deployed, but also you have agency in influencing that process. And I encourage you to exercise your agency in articulating both your needs, your wants, and also what you want to do when it comes to technology.
right. And I think there's a whole section in the book, and that you just sort of mentioned to it about how we can create change together, right? So change, so as the title is, change does not happen in silos, right? We're all stronger together, and those different roles for policymakers, communities, funders and investors, technologists, etc. And all of us needs to understand what our role is, and sort of not be afraid to play a role in how technology sort of affects our lives. I would say though, it's sort of as for me as somebody who's not a developer at all, who's sitting at the end of the sort of the production line, who's sort of the receiver. It is very difficult to participate in that process, and I don't know if you found ways for people to actually participate in that, in sort of the development of tech tools. Right now, for instance, I have my iPhone, and ChatGPT is going to be on my phone. I had no say in that process. I mean, realistically, what are the ways that people can do that? That can people can get involved in sort of how technology affects their lives.
Absolutely. And I do want to acknowledge that it is difficult as a single person, wherever you are, to influence the large tech companies and even small tech companies as they are developing tools and running and deploying them in various ways. I, with my engineering degree and having worked in the White House, also sometimes have difficulty in influencing this process. And I'm actively now this morning was trying to figure out how to turn off something that had been turned on by Instagram. was trying to figure out how I want to use technology. So I do recognize that that is challenging. I will say that the opportunities you have are things like engaging some of your policymakers. They are things like searching for alternatives to different technologies. For example, there are web browsers that don't track you as much as the more mainstream web browsers. And so, is that something you want to decide to choose to do or not choose to do? In the
Mm.
research for our book, my co author, Amy Sample Ward, and I also talked to people who figured out different ways to blend their technology use with their non technology use. And so they might start some organizing through Facebook pages or through WhatsApp groups and then do a lot of the details in person. Also, recognizing when tech is the right answer for something and when
Right.
sometimes you just need to pick up the phone and call someone, or you need to just have a conversation, or you need to physically be someplace. And so I think those are some of the
Yeah.
ways where you can decide how technology, um, how you interact with technology in your personal life. But when given the opportunity, if you are to be a part of some of these focus group sessions or other communications with larger tech companies, please take it.
Yeah, I suppose we're not entirely helpless, and I suppose we can participate in some way, and that's available. That even if it's a little drop in the sort of big pool of tech in the world, it sort of makes a difference. And I appreciate you joining us for this episode. We keep these short, even if we have a lot more questions. We try and keep them short, and obviously there's a whole book that people can sort of go and learn from. It's the technology that comes next: how changemakers, technologists, and philanthropists can build an equitable world. And obviously we've described what we think or what you think an equitable world is, and I'm hoping that people who are listening here sort of can relate to that and feel that that's something they want to do. I think your book is available on Amazon and other bookstores.
Yes, the book is available wherever books are sold online. So please check it there. And someone would like to get in contact with me, they can reach out on LinkedIn or X or Instagram.
Right. That's Afua Bruce. Please join us for the second installment of today's episode.
Thank you so much.